Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world where the clink of tankards echoes down cobbled streets, smoke curls from low timber-bird taverns, and the scent of warm ale mixes with the faint tang of fire and wood. You trudge through the morning mist, your boots sticky with last night's spilled beer, and already, even before the sun peeks over the rooftops, you feel the pull of another pint, waiting to steady your hands and soothe your nerves. You probably won't survive a full day on medieval rations without this liquid companion. But tonight, that won't matter, because tonight we're here to wander through history in a way that's gentle, strange, and quietly intoxicating. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love picturing where you are as we drift through centuries together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you step inside the first tavern, the air thick with smoke and the low hum of conversation, you notice that life in medieval Europe revolved around the humble brew. Water was often a suspect substance tinged with the invisible menace of contaminations, sewage, dead animals, travelers, leftovers. People developed a healthy paranoia about untreated water, and you can almost feel that same unease creeping over you if you were to sip from a random stream today. In contrast, small beer, a low-alcohol fermented drink barely stronger than a modern soft drink, became a daily staple. It is strange to think that children, monks, nuns, and peasants alike drank nearly a gallon a day, not just for enjoyment, but because it was safer than water, calorie-rich, and most importantly liquid bread. You reach for a wooden mug, feeling its warmth, and imagine swallowing a drink that has sustained generations without ever knowing if you might have picked up a plague from a river. The monks were the silent heroes of this history. Hidden behind monastery walls, they were the original brewers, chronicling recipes in neat scripts, introducing hops for bitterness and preservation, and occasionally bending the rules of fasting by crafting stronger beers. You can almost hear the quiet clatter of barrels, the careful mixing of ingredients, and maybe a whispered joke among novices about the holy spirits of their brews. Historians still argue whether the monks intended their brewing as purely practical sustenance, or if there was an element of ritual and delight in their craft. Either way, their contributions shaped not just survival, but the very culture of medieval drinking. Stepping back into the tavern, you see peasants and merchants sharing the same space. The low tables crowded with mugs, plates, and scraps of food. It's chaotic but cozy, a world temporarily flattened by the influence of ale. Drinking was on tea, about constant inebriation. Small beer gentle alcohol content meant daily life continued, but during feasts and festivals, heavy drinking could quickly take over, and tankards became tools of both camaraderie and chaos. You can almost picture a bar fight erupting over a spilled drink, furniture flying, villagers laughing or cursing in equal measure. And amidst this, alewives, women who brewed and sold small beer, managed the flow of drinks, their presence vital to both sustenance and the social rhythm of the town. Oddities abound. People sometimes used ale as medicine, a warm tonic to dull aches, or a strange antiseptic for cuts. Taxes and regulations tried to control consumption, though enforcement was laughably inconsistent. And beyond the practical, the act of drinking was entwined with ceremony, superstition, and subtle power plays between classes. Nobles might sip spiced wines as a display of wealth, while peasants quietly endured the bitter tang of their daily ration. You lift your mug, imagining the faces of medieval folk from all walks of life, united by the simplest necessity, a safe, nourishing drink. The smells of roasted bread, hops, and wood smoke mingle with the faint echo of singing from a distant corner of the tavern. And as you breathe it in, you feel the world shift slightly, time folding, letting you stand in the soft, warm chaos of history, one quiet sip at a time. Remember that curiosity about life, centuries ago, a bit like looking at a crooked, dimly lit painting where every detail has a story, every shadow hides a secret, and the edges blur between fact and folklore. Here, in the gentle embrace of the past, you begin to understand not just what people drank, but why it mattered so much, why it shaped their days, their laughter, and their rituals. Even now, centuries later, small beer seems humble yet profound, a simple drink that anchored daily life, forged social bonds, and occasionally sparked both trouble and delight. And as you settle back, feeling the weight of history gently pressing around you, it's easy to see that survival, celebration, and curiosity often went hand in hand, poured into mugs just like the one you imagine holding. In these quiet moments, with only the soft clink of imagination echoing in your mind, you feel almost at home in that smoky medieval tavern just for tonight. You trudge through the narrow streets before sunrise, the chill of morning brushing your cheeks, and already the scent of warm ale teases your senses. In medieval Europe, this wasn't unusual. People often began their day with a drink, sometimes before they even brushed their teeth or washed their face. You raise your imaginary mug and take an invisible sip, wondering how starting with ale could feel so ordinary, yet so essential. Historians still argue whether this practice was purely practical or culturally ingrained. But you can help imagining the world where a morning pint was as routine as a modern coffee. The reasons are surprisingly logical. Water was frequently contaminated, hiding invisible threats in plain sight. Runoff from latrines, discarded food, dead animals, travelers' filth. You might wrinkle your nose just picturing a medieval river teeming with unseen hazards. But for them, the solution was simple. Brew it out. Small beer, barely stronger than today's non-alcoholic drinks, was safer because fermentation killed most pathogens. It was calorie-rich, soothing, and deceptively sustaining. You take another slow sip in your mind, tasting the faint sweetness and earthy temps, and wonder how ordinary life felt when survival depended as much on a drink as on bread. Children drank it too. You probably picture pint-sized versions of yourself at a tavern table, nursing mugs almost as tall as their hands could manage. It's strange to think that what would now seem a grown-up indulgence was part of everyday nutrition. Monks, nuns, and peasants all shared this ritual, though with slightly different variations. The monasteries were silent powerhouses of brewing knowledge, documenting recipes, measuring carefully, and sometimes joking in Latin about holy spirits that might rise in more ways than one. You imagine the quiet monk chuckling to himself, a foamy mug in hand, carefully noting the exact proportion of barley, water, and hops. By mid-morning, the streets would hum with people balancing their daily chores with the soft comfort of their ale. Merchants hauled goods to markets, children chased one another around barrels, and farmers set off to fields already fortified by liquid bread. You feel the warmth of the brew spreading slowly, as if the cold air itself is softened by the simple, shared pleasure of drinking. And even then, the social dimension is clear. Taverns weren't just places to guzzle a safe beverage. They were hubs for gossip, bartering, and community ties. As you wander through this imagined medieval street, you see peasants exchanging news, a merchant laughing at a joke, a child spilling ale on the cobblestones. Life mingled seamlessly with drink. The quirky details of consumption are fascinating. Some brews contained herbs, spices, or even tiny amounts of opium, though you'd need a careful palate to detect it. You might chuckle, imagining the unintended effects of a slightly too potent batch. Ale was also layered in ritual. Prices, measurements, and even who poured the drink carried unspoken rules. You might notice an alewife nodding approvingly at a customer's etiquette, or a monk quietly observing how much a visitor drank, reminding them that moderation was still valued around, if that concept sometimes melted away during festival days. By late morning, the street smells shift as bakeries begin their work. The mingling scent of freshly baked bread and warm ale forms a comforting, almost intoxicating aroma. You stroll past market stalls, hearing fragments of conversation, catching the soft laughter, and recognizing that this early morning drink isn't just about survival, it's a social glue. It binds people together in quiet, almost unnoticed ways. You sip again, imagining the dull buzz of warmth along your chest, and realize that the line between sustenance, ritual, and pleasure was beautifully blurred. Even now, the image lingers. A child balances a small mug, a peasant wipes sweat from his brow while counting coins, and a monk quietly hums while tending barrels of amber liquid. Small beer, humble as it seems, shaped rhythms of life, tethered people to their communities, and quietly fortified them against the invisible dangers of their world. You take a slow breath and feel that same gentle security, as if just imagining it could protect you from the unseen perils of a modern morning. And with that, you move forward through the streets, guided by the soft warmth of fermented grains, ready to see what the day on, perhaps a tavern's chaos, will bring next. You push open the heavy wooden door of the tavern, and immediately the warmth and dim glow of candlelight wrap around you like a comforting cloak. The murmur of conversation, the scrape of chairs, the soft thump of tankards against rough wooden tables, all of it greets you as if you've been expected for centuries. Taverns were the heartbeat of medieval communities, spaces where survival, gossip, commerce, and mischief mingled in thick, intoxicating layers. You probably won't leave sober tonight in your imagination, but that doesn't matter. Here, you're a quiet observer, tracing the stories hidden in the smoke and laughter. You notice peasants leaning over the tables, talking in low, urgent tones about crops, debts, and the latest brawl at the market. Merchants argue over prices, counting coins with stained fingers. Even the occasional noble, disguised in travel-worn clothing, might slip in for a private pint. Historians still argue whether taverns truly blurred class lines or if they simply created fleeting illusions of equality. Either way, you can feel the temporary democracy in the air, each person bound together by the simple act of drinking. A corner of the tavern reveals a small performance. A fiddler strums a cheerful tune while a few locals clap along, swaying unsteadily to the rhythm. You imagine yourself stepping closer, feeling the thrum of wooden floors underfoot, the warmth of body heat from strangers pressed around you. The quirkier details of tavern life become apparent the mummers who performed impromptu skits, jesters hired for a night of frivolity, and even the occasional drunkard attempting to recite epic poetry mid-song. Small incidences, spilled drink, a toppled chair, a forgotten perseem trivial, yet they define the rhythm of this space. Women move gracefully among the tables, serving drinks, offering a wink, and keeping the atmosphere just chaotic enough to feel alive without descending into full anarchy. Alewives were not only servers, but brewers, purveyors of small beer and social anchors. You might notice one of them pausing to whisper advice to a nervous newcomer, or chuckling at a particularly loud peasant boasting about his harvest. The tavern is a stage, and everyone plays their role, whether they know it or not. Your attention drifts to the games being played. Dice clatter across the tables. Small wagers are made, and laughter erupts when someone cheats or appears to cheat just enough to keep the drama flowing. Scholars debate whether such tavern games were primarily entertainment, subtle gambling education, or mechanisms for social negotiation. You feel that ambiguity yourself, noticing how the rules bend in practice, depending on the crowd's mood. The games are messy, human, and completely absorbing. The smells of spiced ale, roasted meats, and the faint, sour temps of unfinished fermentation fill your senses. You might lean back against a post, listening to a storyteller weaving a tale of a local hero, a defeated rival, or a long-forgotten skirmish. These oral histories, full of exaggeration and embellishment, are often the only record of small communities' lives. And sometimes, if you're lucky, a particularly drunken patron adds their own twist, turning a minor event into a legend, complete with ghosts, hidden treasures, or clever escapes. Outside, the early morning sun begins to climb higher, casting thin lines of light through narrow windows. Inside, time feels suspended. Tankards empty and refill. Chairs scrape against the wooden floor, and the low murmur of voices rises and falls like a tide. You watch as an older man tells a story about a neighbor's misfortune, the audience laughing at the ridiculous missteps, but also learning lessons about caution, trust, and humility. Quirky as it seems, the tavern functions as a university of life, a place where stories, advice, and warnings circulate alongside ale. Somewhere in the corner, you notice a small sketch on the wall, perhaps carved long ago by a bored mason or a wandering traveler. It's a crude image of a dragon, or maybe just a large cat, and you can't tell which. Details like this pepper tavern life, little glimpses of individual creativity surviving in a transient space. You imagine tracing your fingers over the grooves, wondering about the person who left it, their day, their choices. By late morning, the tavern is in full swing, a low symphony of clinking mugs, soft laughter, and whispered secrets. You feel the pulse of community, the living rhythm of people bound together by necessity, leisure, and shared spaces. Here, drinking is not just survival, it is connection, storytelling, and culture embodied. Every spill, every laugh, every small argument is a brushstroke painting a picture of a world alive with humanity, humor, and humility. And as you step toward the door, imagining the sunlight outside, you carry with you the echoes of these tavern tales, the warmth, the chaos, the tiny, vivid details. They linger in your mind, reminding you that life centuries ago was messy, beautiful, and profoundly human, all wrapped up in mugs of humble, sustaining ale. You step quietly through the heavy wooden doors of the monastery, the faint scent of burning tallow mingling with the earthy aroma of fermenting grains. The air feels cooler here, calmer, yet underneath it pulses a quiet, industrious energy. Monks shuffle along the stone corridors, their habits brushing softly against the floor, and you realize, almost immediately, that this is a world where survival, devotion, and craftsmanship converge. Here, in these sacred walls, the art of brewing is more than necessity, it's ritual, science, and occasionally, subtle mischief. You probably won't imagine yourself kneeling at an altar of barley and hops, but tonight you will follow every careful step, every quiet hum of devotion, and discover what it meant to be a medieval brewer. Monks were the unexpected alchemists of the Middle Ages, long before pubs or commercial breweries became common. Monasteries cultivated grains, experimented with fermentation, and meticulously recorded recipes. You watch as a novice carries a heavy basket of malted barley terroir, a wooden mash tun, the grains spilling slightly, golden and aromatic. Scholars still argue whether monks were driven primarily by spiritual obligation, economic necessity, or sheer curiosity. But it's impossible not to notice the care with which every stage of brewing was executed. A pinch of hops here, a careful adjustment of water temperature, their every step measured, documented, and refined over decades. The purpose of their brewing extended beyond nutrition. Small beer, a low-alcohol beverage, sustained the monastic community, providing calories and hydration in a form safer than water, which could carry disease from unclean wells or nearby latrines. You imagine sipping a warm mug of ale in the quiet morning, feeling the gentle buzz of energy spread through your body, and understanding why monks relied on this. Liquid sustenance, especially during fasting periods when solid food was forbidden. During Lent or other religious fasts, beer often replaced meals entirely, a quiet, golden rebellion sanctioned by holy rule. In the dim light of the cellar, you notice barrels stacked meticulously, the wood darkened by age and repeated use. Some barrels hold small beer for daily consumption, barely alcoholic, while others contain stronger brews meant for special occasions or trade. Mead, the sweet fermented honey drink, is occasionally produced, both for ritual purposes and for the rare, indulgent visitor. You can almost hear the soft plop of honey falling into vats, the occasional hiss of fermentation, the faint tang of yeast mingling with smoke from the torches. Quirky as it seems, some monasteries even experimented with unusual flavorings herbs that doubled as medicine, rare spices brought by traders, or remnants of recipes preserved in dusty manuscripts. The social dimension of monastic brewing is equally fascinating. You wander past the scriptorium where illuminated manuscripts rest, the edges faintly stained with spilt ale, a silent reminder that labor and leisure, work and ritual were often inseparable. Monks would occasionally share a mug with visiting pilgrims or neighboring abbeys, quietly teaching the subtleties of taste, the art of fermentation, and even the ethical responsibilities of consumption. Despite the cloistered life, these interactions spread brewing knowledge far beyond monastery walls. Historians still argue whether monks intended their craft to be primarily practical, or if there was a subtle intention of delight, of creating beauty in liquid form as an extension of spiritual devotion. You pause at a corner where a monk carefully measures out hops, marveling at the precision. Hops were introduced as a preservative, a bitter counterpoint to sweet or sour flavors, but their use also transformed the flavor profile of beer, setting the stage for centuries of experimentation. You might smile, imagining a novice trying to balance the bitterness just right, accidentally tipping the scales and producing a batch with an unexpectedly sharp tang, prompting both laughter and exasperation from the supervising monk. These small moments of levity were essential. The cloister was a place of discipline, yes, but also of humanity, curiosity, and occasional imperfection. The architecture itself facilitates the brewing process. Thick stone walls maintain steady temperatures, cellars remain cool and dark, and carefully designed drainage channels manage overflow. You trace your fingers along a worn stone wall and imagine the vibrations of footsteps over centuries, countless pairs of hands working grains, stirring mash, and lifting barrels heavy with liquid gold. In some monasteries, brewing was a communal activity, bringing together novices, lay brothers, and even visiting scholars, creating a subtle rhythm of shared labor and learning. Quirky historical notes peek through the serious work. Some manuscripts suggest that brews were infused with minor herbs intended to brighten spirits or invigorate contemplation, a polite medieval euphemism that might include anything from mild laxatives to soporific roots. You laugh quietly, imagining a monk sipping an experimental blend and nodding solemnly while his stomach protests. These curious concoctions reveal that medieval brewing was both practical and playful, governed by necessity, but occasionally flirting with experimentation that modern palates might find bizarre. Beyond the practical, brewing had economic significance. Monasteries often produced more beer than needed for internal consumption, trading with nearby towns or pilgrims. The sale of ale could fund repairs, charitable works, or acquisition of rare texts. You picture a monk carefully counting coins received in exchange for barrels of ale, the faint ink marks on ledgers documenting each transaction. Brewing thus becomes a bridge between the sacred and the secular, nourishing both body and community, both spiritual devotion and worldly economy. And yet, the human element remains central. You see a young novice, cheeks flushed, learning the subtleties of fermentation, the timing of hops, the careful balance of temperature and yeast. An elder monk leans over, offering a subtle correction or a whispered encouragement. You recognize the same dynamics everywhere apprentices learning from masters. Small errors tolerated for the sake of experience, and occasional bursts of humor or quiet triumph as a batch reaches perfection. It's a vivid reminder that medieval life was full of small victories, tiny joys, and shared labor that bound communities together. In the broader context, monasteries shaped European brewing traditions for centuries. Techniques perfected within these stone walls spread gradually, influencing secular breweries, taverns, and eventually the industrial production of beer. You might feel a curious pride imagining the ripple effect, a single monk's careful notes contributing to centuries of taste, culture, and daily life. Historians still argue how much of modern brewing owes itself directly to monastic experimentation versus independent town brewers. But you sense the deep, quiet legacy nonetheless. You take a slow breath and imagine the sounds, smells, and sensations of monastic brewing, the hiss of fermentation, the warmth of freshly poured ale, the faint sweetness of honey, and the comforting rhythm of hands moving in practiced cycles. Even the quirks, the accidental spillage, the tiny explosions of carbonation, the occasional mystery flavors, feel intimate, human, and profoundly connected to the passage of time. By afternoon, the brewing floor is alive but quiet, each monk engaged in their tasks with calm diligence. You wander among the vats, noticing the subtle differences between batches, the variations in aroma, and the careful attention paid to each stage. Some barrels will be shared with the local poor, a charitable gift, while others might remain within the monastery, consumed slowly over meals or special religious observances. Drinking, producing, and sharing intertwine seamlessly. Finally, you step back to the doorway and observe the scene as a whole. The monastery is a microcosm of medieval lifework, devotion, sustenance, and experimentation coexisting in harmony. The monk's brewing reflects survival, artistry, spirituality, and social responsibility all at once. You can almost hear the gentle hum of history, the quiet laughter echoing across centuries, the soft clink of mugs that never existed in your hands but feel entirely real. And as you leave the monastery, stepping back into the streets, the warmth and lessons of this sacred craft linger in your imagination, a reminder of how something as simple as a mug of ale could shape lives, communities, and even civilizations. You carry this vision forward, the taste of small beer, the meticulous care of monks, the flicker of candlelight over amber liquid, and feel the subtle pulse of history under your skin. It's not just a story about drink. It's a story about humanity, ingenuity, and the quiet ways ordinary people, guided by devotion, necessity, and curiosity, crafted a legacy that still resonates centuries later. You take one last slow breath, letting the scent of malt, honey, and stone linger, and step gently back into the chaos and warmth of the wider medieval world, ready to wander into the next tavern, festival, and feast. You push open the low, timber-framed door of a bustling tavern once more, and the smells hit you instantly. Malted barley, spiced wine, roasted meats, and a faint, tangy undertone of unwashed humanity. The air hums with chatter, clinking mugs, and the occasional outburst of laughter or a dropped tankard. Tonight, you aren't just a visitor, you're an apprentice in the chaotic, sensory-rich world of medieval mixology, learning the alchemy of flavor, class, and social signaling. Historians still argue whether the blending of beverages was primarily practical, medicinal, or a form of entertainment. But as you wander past tables, you begin to understand how central it was to everyday life. You notice a row of alewives behind the counter, hands busy pouring, stirring, and topping mugs with froth that glistens in the dim candlelight. Some are mixing small beer with cider or sweetening ale with honey, spices, or fruit, creating subtle variations to entice patrons. You might chuckle, imagining a peasant expecting plain, small beer and receiving instead a slightly pungent, unexpectedly fragrant concoction, eyes widening in surprise and delight. These tweaks were more than culinary experiments. They were subtle statements of skill, hospitality, and ingenuity. The drinks themselves reflect the hierarchy of medieval society. Peasants sip small beer or weak cider, a daily staple that fills their bellies and wards off unsafe water. Nobles and merchants indulge in spiced wine, mead, or imported liquors, sometimes blended with exotic ingredients like saffron, nutmeg, or rosewater. You imagine a wealthy guest swirling a goblet, inhaling the heady aroma, and judging the subtlety of flavor with a critical eye. Mixing beverages was both a practical skill and a subtle display of social sophistication, a way to impress, control, or charm. The quirky side of medieval mixology reveals itself in unexpected ways. Some recipes suggest combining ale with curds, herbs, or even fermented fruits that, to modern palates, might seem bizarre or unpalatable. You might grin at the idea of a group of villagers nervously sipping a new batch, holding their noses and bracing for the flavor, while secretly enjoying the thrill of novelty. This playful experimentation wasn't just fun. It also allowed tavern keepers and alewives to showcase their creativity and keep patrons coming back for more. Medicinal uses were another critical aspect. You glance at a small shelf behind the counter where jars of dried herbs, roots, and honey are stored. Ale, mead, and spiced wine were often administered as remedies. A warm, honeyed drink to soothe a cough, a dash of aromatic herbs to settle a stomach, or a potent brew as a painkiller during minor injuries. Scholars still debate the efficacy of these treatments, but for many, the ritual of drinking itself, sipping slowly, enjoying the warmth, and observing the care of the preparer offered psychological comfort alongside any physical relief. Taverns were also theaters for social negotiation. You notice a merchant discussing a deal over mugs of spiced ale, gesturing broadly with frothy fingers. A peasant nearby leans in, offering advice in exchange for a small pour. And you see how drink lubricated not only throats but relationships. Deals, reconciliations, and clandestine plans often took shape in the half-light of candlelit rooms, guided subtly by a well-mixed beverage or a carefully timed toast. Ale, wine, or mead wasn't merely consumed. It orchestrated social dynamics, bridging gaps between class, occupation, and temperament. By the hearth, you see a group engaged in a drinking game that seems at once chaotic and deliberate. Wooden tankards thump against each other, dice clatter across a table, and laughter erupts as someone topples backward into a stool. Drinking games were more than entertainment. They were a social equalizer, a ritualized test of skill, luck, and courage. Scholars still argue whether such games primarily reinforced social bonds or subtly exposed tensions within a group, but you feel the energy of controlled chaos filling the room. Each mug, each roll of the dice, carries a tiny story of competition, bravado, and camaraderie. The night deepens, and you wander toward the corner where a seasoned alewife demonstrates her craft. She mixes a bitter ale with a dash of mead, a hint of spice, and a swirl of spring water. You watch as she explains the balance of flavors, the timing of each pour, and the importance of temperature control, all in a voice soft enough that you lean in closer, straining to hear. Quirky as it seems, she also adds a small pinch of crushed herbs, rumored to brighten the spirit, though whether this is superstition or a subtle aromatic enhancement remains a topic of scholarly debate. You lean back, imagining yourself savoring the concoction, feeling warmth bloom in your chest and the faint buzz of fermentation lifting the edges of your awareness. Women's roles in mixology extend beyond the tavern counter. Festivals and fairs offered opportunities for temporary booths, where alewives and brewers sold experimental beverages to the curious or adventurous. You picture a crowded square, sunlight bouncing off wooden stalls, and the mingling scents of fruits, malt, and honey drawing in passersby. Some brews were deliberately theatrical, fizzing, spiced, or sweetened to attract attention, while others were carefully restrained, showcasing subtle mastery of flavor. Quirky ingredients like rose petals, marigold, or even a hint of saffron might elevate a simple ale into something resembling artistry, a taste both fleeting and memorable. Even the architecture of taverns influenced the craft. Stone floors kept barrels cool, shelves maintained controlled temperatures, and chimneys vented excess heat or smoke. You wander along the counter, fingers brushing over rough wood, imagining the careful coordination required to serve dozens of patrons while maintaining consistent quality. Every aspect, from preparation to presentation, reflects a deep understanding of material, human behavior, and environmental conditions. Historians still debate how standardized medieval recipes truly were. Yet the subtle variation from one tavern to another gave each space its unique identity, a signature style embodied in taste, aroma, and ritual. As night progresses, the tavern hums with stories, laughter, and occasional disputes. You pass a table where a group debates local politics over a shared pitcher, voices rising and falling like a gentle tide. Nearby, a child of an alewife secretly samples a sweetened beverage, eyes wide with wonder, discovering for the first time the thrill of flavor beyond necessity. You notice that even the smallest sip carries social, cultural, and emotional weight, linking generations and reinforcing community bonds in ways that go far beyond mere nutrition. By the flickering candlelight, you begin to understand that medieval mixology was a subtle, complex craft. It wasn't just about alcohol. It was about survival, artistry, social navigation, and the shared rhythms of community life. Each mug poured, each spice added, each careful stir reflects centuries of experimentation, trial, and human ingenuity. You might feel a quiet awe, imagining the layers of knowledge, practice, and personality embedded in every glass, bridging gaps between peasant, monk, merchant, and noble alike. Finally, you stand at the threshold, observing the tavern in all its chaotic glory, voices overlapping, mugs clinking, laughter rising and falling like a living rhythm. You carry with you the warmth of small beer, the complex dance of flavors in spiced wine, the quiet pride of alewives and brewers, and the subtle human stories embedded in every pour. It's a world simultaneously practical and playful, sacred and mundane, chaotic yet orderly. And as you step back into the cooler night air, the echoes of clinking tankards, whispered deals, and laughter linger, a faint, comforting pulse that reminds you of the enduring, vibrant life woven around something as simple as a drink. You slip into the warm glow of a bustling village square, the sun low and casting long shadows over timbered houses. The faint smell of smoke from hearth fires mingles with the sweet aroma of fermenting ale, and you immediately notice the activity at the center of it all. Women moving briskly from stall to stall, carrying wooden trays, earthen jugs, and baskets of frothy mugs. These women are the lifeblood of medieval drinking culture, the alewives, and, tonight, you follow them closely, learning how indispensable their craft was to the survival, economy, and daily life of their communities. As you approach, one woman smiles knowingly, handing a warm mug of small beer to a child who sips cautiously, eyes wide with wonder. Women weren't just servers. They were brewers, distributors, and guardians of taste. In many households, especially in towns and villages, women produced small beer for family consumption and surplus for sale. You notice her stirring a bubbling barrel, adding a pinch of herbs and a touch of honey, her hands steady despite the heat and the noise around her. Scholars still debate the extent of female autonomy in brewing, but it's clear that alewives wielded both economic power and cultural influence. You lean in closer and notice the subtle artistry of her work. Each jug is carefully balanced in sweetness, bitterness, and aroma, reflecting years of practice passed down from mother to daughter. Some recipes are closely guarded secrets, whispered only among trusted women in the community. You probably wouldn't survive a day trying to replicate these without guidance. The slightest misstep, too much honey or too little fermentation, and the batch could sour, drawing complaints or lost sales. Yet, this meticulous attention produced beverages that nourished bodies, sparked social interactions, and occasionally dazzled visitors. Women's roles extended far beyond production. At festivals, fairs, and market days, alewives set up temporary stalls, calling out to passersby, offering samples, and enticing merchants to linger. You watch the way they balance charm and skill, knowledge and negotiation. Some juggle multiple mugs at once, moving gracefully through the crowd, while ensuring that each measure meets their exacting standards. In this way, alewives were not only brewers, but also entrepreneurs, skilled in both craft and commerce. Quirky as it seems, some women experimented with minor magical enhancements or, at least, the illusion of magic to boost sales. A dash of crushed herbs might be described as a heart brightener, a hint of honey as a spirit lifter, and patrons would sip eagerly, believing in the subtle power of the brew. Historians still argue whether these embellishments were intended seriously or simply as clever marketing. But for you, wandering through the square, the effect is immediate: curiosity, delight, and a faint warmth in the chest. You follow a group of women as they make their way toward a tavern, balancing jugs of ale on their hips, their steps almost rhythmic. Inside, the scene is familiar: frothy, mugs clink, voices hum, and patrons settle into conversation, business, or gossip. The alewives move among them, topping up mugs, offering advice, and even mediating minor disputes. You realize that these women were not only facilitators of drinking, but also the subtle social glue holding communities together. They ensured that interactions ran smoothly, that beverages were palatable, and that patrons returned sometimes day after day for both sustenance and social connection. It's not all pleasant work, of course. You notice the heat of the stoves, the weight of full barrels, the occasional argument over payment or taste. Yet, there is an undeniable rhythm to their labor, a quiet mastery honed over years. You can almost hear the soft cadence of their footsteps, the gentle clinking of mugs, the hum of voices rising and falling like a tide. Even in hardship, these women carry a sense of pride and ownership, a deep understanding of the life-sustaining role they play. Their influence extended into ritual and medicine as well. Some alewives added herbs to address minor ailments: ginger for digestion, rosemary for memory, chamomile for command. Subtle variations in recipes could serve both social and practical functions. You imagine a weary traveler receiving a mug of warm, small beer spiced with herbs, feeling comforted and nourished, the gentle buzz of fermentation adding a touch of cheer. In this way, women were custodians, not only of flavor, but of community well-being. The tavern itself becomes a stage for storytelling, negotiation, and occasional mischief. You watch a woman subtly orchestrate a drinking game, encouraging patrons to participate, laughing softly at their clumsy attempts. These games reinforced social bonds, provided entertainment, and occasionally served as informal trials of skill or courage. You probably won't survive a day without laughing at the chaos, spilling mugs, and playful banter. But these moments highlight the delicate interplay between discipline and disorder that characterized medieval tavern culture. You wander toward the outskirts of the room, observing a quiet moment. An alewife leans over a barrel, scribbling notes in the margins of a tattered notebook, recipes, measurements, observations, perhaps even small experiments for the next batch. Scholars still debate how widespread written records were among women brewers, but even a hint of documentation reveals the combination of practical knowledge, intuition, and careful observation that defined their craft. Each entry carries centuries of accumulated wisdom, a quiet testament to skill passed down through generations. You notice that their work bridged both public and private life. In small households, brewing sustained families. In public spaces, it fueled commerce and culture. Women balanced domestic responsibilities with entrepreneurial ambition, their daily labor intertwining with community rhythms, seasonal festivals, and spiritual observances. You might smile, imagining a mother of 3 carefully monitoring fermentation while keeping an eye on children, her multitasking a dance of precision, patience, and resilience. Even in moments of levity, alewives exercised subtle influence. You observe the way a soft smile, a well-timed pour, or a hint of spice can ease tension, inspire laughter, or spark connection. These gestures, almost imperceptible, carry social weight. Patrons might not consciously register the skill behind a perfectly balanced mug, yet it shapes the experience, encourages return visits, and reinforces community bonds. You sense that this invisible labor, quietly executed, underpins much of what you've seen in taverns, markets, and festivals alike. The night deepens, and the crowd thins, leaving the alewives to clean, sort, and prepare for another day. You follow them through the echoing streets, hearing the faint clang of barrels, the soft murmur of conversation, and the distant howl of a dog. Their labor is constant, yet infused with humanity, skill, and subtle artistry. You probably won't survive a day without appreciating the quiet, relentless expertise required. But as you watch them disappear into the shadows, you carry with you a vivid sense of their importance. In this world, women of the ale were indispensable. They shaped taste, mediated social life, ensured nourishment, and subtly wielded influence through craft, charm, and commerce. You might chuckle at the quirky herbs, the playful embellishments, and the occasional mishap. But beneath it all lies a profound understanding of human behavior, community dynamics, and the delicate alchemy of drink. You step back from the square, imagining the warm glow of a tavern still alive with voices, laughter, and the faint hum of fermentation. And as you wander toward the quiet streets, the image lingers. Women carrying jugs, balancing mugs, stirring vats, scribbling notes, and laughing softly. Their presence shaping not just what people drank, but how they lived, celebrated, and connected. You realize that the alewives' legacy is subtle, yet enduring, woven into centuries of European culture, economy, and daily life. Their work reminds you that even in the humblest of trades, skill, care, and humanity can leave an imprint far beyond a single tavern or season, echoing through history with a soft, enduring pulse. You step back into the dimly lit tavern, the warmth of the hearth washing over you like a familiar, slightly intoxicating embrace. The scent of malted grains, roasting meat, and faint smoke from the hearth mingles in the air. Around you, a lively scene unfolds. Patrons of all sorts, peasants, merchants, and even the occasional wandering noble jostle, argue, laugh, and clink mugs with a kind of chaotic rhythm that seems almost choreographed, yet entirely spontaneous. This is the heart of medieval social life, the tavern, a hub of both sustenance and disorder, where alcohol fuels interaction in all its messy glory. As you weave through the crowd, you notice the subtle power dynamics at play. A group of peasants occupies a corner table, leaning in close as they whisper rumors about a traveling tax collector. Nearby, a merchant gestures dramatically, recounting a recent dispute over wool, and his audience listens intently, hanging on every word, mugs balanced precariously in hand. Taverns were places of negotiation and strategy as much as they were spaces for leisure. You probably wouldn't survive a day here without noticing the delicate interplay of persuasion, intimidation, and charm that lubricated human interactions. Quirky and occasionally chaotic, these gatherings sometimes escalate into outright chaos. You hear the sudden crash of a tankard hitting the stone floor, followed by laughter, a shouted apology, and the quick intervention of a barkeep. Drinking games, arm wrestling matches, and spontaneous contests of wit frequently erupted into full-blown skirmishes. Historians still argue whether these brawls were primarily violent, competitive, or performative, but the energy in the room makes it clear that such moments served as social pressure valves, releasing tension, reinforcing hierarchies, and establishing reputations. You approach a central table where a few men have started a game with dice and mugs, the clatter punctuating the tavern's background hum. Each throw is accompanied by exaggerated gestures, jesting insults, and occasional cheers. Women move skillfully among them, topping up mugs, diffusing small disputes, and occasionally delivering a sly remark that elicits laughter. Here, drink acts as both lubricant and leveler, a tool for connection and a subtle enforcer of social norms. Even the smallest spill or misstep can provoke laughter or mild scolding, reinforcing a shared understanding of behavior, etiquette, and limits. The architecture of the tavern itself contributes to this controlled chaos. Low beams force patrons to duck and navigate carefully. Uneven stone floors make balancing mugs a challenge, and the open hearth radiates heat unevenly, creating pockets of warmth and cooler edges where conversation naturally shifts. You probably wouldn't survive the night without learning to read these spaces, understanding where to stand, who to approach, and when to step back. The tavern's layout subtly orchestrates the flow of human energy, guiding interactions in ways both obvious and invisible. Amid the disorder, you notice moments of unexpected intimacy. A pair of travelers shares a quiet conversation over mugs of small beer, their voices soft against the general din. Nearby, a group of children carefully supervised sips mild ale, giggling at their first taste of fermented liquid. These quieter interludes punctuate the chaos, reminding you that taverns were not only sites of revelry and disorder, but also spaces for learning, observation, and social apprenticeship. Even in the midst of brawls, games, and laughter, subtler forms of connection persist. The tavern's patrons reflect the stratified nature of medieval society. But within these walls, distinctions often blur. Peasants, merchants, and minor nobles mingle under the influence of drink, temporarily suspended from rigid social hierarchies. You watch as a burly peasant jestingly corrects a merchant on his counting, the merchant laughing good-naturedly and tossing him a piece of coin. Here, alcohol acts as social lubricant, encouraging exchanges that might otherwise be taboo or impossible. Scholars still debate whether this mingling truly leveled social distinctions or simply masked underlying hierarchies, but the effect on the floor is tangible: laughter, negotiation, and shared experience that crosses class boundaries. You notice the quirky rituals embedded in tavern life. Patrons toast the health of absent friends, pledge loyalty in jest, or make elaborate wagers over trivial victories in games. Sometimes, small traditions, touching a tankard 3 times before drinking, or leaving a coin for the next patron serve as social glue, binding participants in shared practices and reinforcing a sense of communal identity. These practices might seem trivial or whimsical to an outsider, yet they carry the weight of social expectation and continuity, echoing generations of tacit knowledge and communal behavior. The role of tavern keepers and alewives becomes even more apparent as the evening deepens. They move through the crowd with practiced ease, balancing mugs, mediating disputes, and occasionally orchestrating games or contests. Their work is both labor and performance, requiring an acute awareness of human psychology, social dynamics, and taste. You probably wouldn't survive a day without noticing the subtle cues they used: tone of voice, body language, timing to maintain order amidst chaos. Every gesture, every carefully timed pour serves to reinforce harmony, or at least a tolerable level of disorder. In some corners, you observe more organized chaos. A group of merchants debates a recent shipment of grain, gesturing wildly, mugs tipping precariously. Nearby, a pair of peasants engages in a playful arm wrestling match, laughter ringing out as they struggle to maintain balance on a wobbly table. A barkeep intervenes just in time, sliding between them with a practiced hand, a soft warning and a nod toward calmer behavior. These micro-narratives unfold simultaneously, overlapping, intersecting, and blending into the ambient energy of the tavern. You might smile at the apparent disorder, but underneath lies a complex choreography of human behavior guided by custom, intuition, and experience. Alcohol itself plays a subtle yet pivotal role in shaping interactions. Small beer, mead, and spiced wine offer a gentle lift, reducing social inhibition without tipping into dangerous intoxication during the day. On feast days or celebrations, stronger spirits enter the scene, escalating energy, exuberance, and occasionally conflict. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the delicate balance between moderation and excess, recognizing that drink functions as both a tool and a variable, subtly shaping behavior, mood, and social exchange. Quirky customs emerge amidst the chaos. Patrons might leave small tokens behind, doodle on walls, or whisper messages to friends in adjacent tables. You notice inscriptions on the wooden beams, etched long ago by a passing traveler or apprentice, initials, symbols, jokes, or warnings. Historians still argue whether these marks were intended as communication, superstition, or playful mischief, but they contribute to the layered social environment. Each mark, each gesture of playfulness or mischief weaves into the living tapestry of the tavern, leaving traces of human presence that echo across generations. By the late evening, the tavern hums with fatigue, lingering warmth, and residual energy. Patrons lean back, mugs emptied or half full, voices softening. You watch as alewives clear the floor, mediate the final disputes, and prepare for closing. The chaos subsides, leaving behind a gentle rhythm, the soft clinking of mugs, quiet conversation and the distant echo of laughter. You probably won't survive a day without feeling the subtle pulse of the space, recognizing that the tavern is both stage and participant, shaping and reflecting the behaviors, desires, and social dynamics of all who enter. Finally, as you step into the cool night air, leaving behind the warmth, noise, and aroma of the tavern, you carry with you the understanding that chaos and order coexist in delicate balance. Taverns were not just places to drink. They were arenas of social negotiation, laboratories of human behavior, theaters of ritual, and sites of both public spectacle and private reflection. The energy you experienced, the laughter, argument, play, and ritual is both ephemeral and enduring, echoing the rhythms of medieval life in ways both tangible and invisible. And as you wander through cobblestone streets, the faint sounds of distant laughter and clinking mugs linger, a reminder that human sociality, messy, playful, and occasionally perilous, has always been intertwined with drink, ritual, and the simple act of gathering together. You realize that to truly appreciate medieval tavern life, you must embrace the chaos, the humor, and the subtle artistry of social interaction that surrounds every mug, every toast, and every shared moment. You step into the bustling open-air square of a medieval town just as the festival begins. Torches flicker along the edges of the streets, casting warm amber light on wooden stalls laden with bread, roasted meats, fruits, and jars of fermented beverages. The air is thick with the scent of roasting venison, sweet honey cakes, and the sharp tang of barley ale. You probably want to survive a day here without tripping over some stray goat or losing your footing on the uneven cobblestones. But the sensory overload pulls you forward, and you gladly navigate the chaos. Tonight, you witness the intoxicating mix of revelry, ritual, and mild mayhem that defined medieval festivals and feasts. At the heart of the square, the long tables stretch like the spine of some great creature, lined with patrons eager for the night's abundance. Peasants, artisans, clergy, and the occasional minor noble share benches, their faces flushed from anticipation, laughter, or a few early sips of ale. The festival is a temporary suspension of the rigid social hierarchy. Here, drink and song blur boundaries, encouraging laughter and mischief that might otherwise be forbidden. Historians still argue whether these moments of communal indulgence genuinely fostered equality or merely masked underlying tensions. But to you wandering among them, the sense of shared humanity is palpable. You spot a troupe of minstrels weaving through the crowd, lutes, pipes, and drums accompanying their mischievous dance. Patrons cheer, clap, and sometimes join in the music, clinking mugs with the rhythm of the drumbeat. The festive atmosphere is carefully choreographed, yet feels spontaneous, a delicate balance between tradition and improvisation. Some dances involve intricate steps, others are rambunctious displays of acrobatic stumbles, and you probably won't survive a day trying to keep pace, but the collective energy sweeps you along effortlessly. Ale flows freely. Small beer keeps the rhythm steady, while stronger ales and meads fuel bursts of exuberance. You notice the subtle social lessons embedded in drinking. A mug passed respectfully, a toast offered with careful eye contact, or the gentle moderation encouraged by more experienced drinkers. Women, often alewives or skilled hostesses, move from table to table, topping up mugs, diffusing disputes, and adding a hint of spice or sweetness to ensure palates remain pleased. Their labor is both invisible and indispensable, and you catch yourself appreciating the artistry behind a simple feasts themselves are theatrical affairs. Platters of roasted meat spork, goose, and occasionally rabbit sit alongside bowls of stews, fresh bread, and fruits preserved with honey. You probably won't survive the richness without slowing down. But the flavors tell stories of agriculture, trade, and culinary experimentation. Honey and spices imported from distant lands speak to the interconnectedness of medieval Europe, even in a small village. Amid this abundance, etiquette and spectacle intertwine. The placement of dishes, the manner of serving, and even the order of toasts are guided by tradition, reflecting social norms, religious observance, and local customs. The quirky elements of festivals delight you. Town criers announce contests and games, piting competitions, mock duels with wooden swords, and dancing contests where the most creative or clumsiest participant wins applause. Children scamper among the tables, giggling at the clumsy adults and occasionally sneaking a sip of mild ale. The chaos is carefully contained. The community knows the boundaries of indulgence, even as they flirt with disorder. Historians still debate how seriously these contests were taken, but you sense that the line between performance, play, and ritual was intentionally blurred. You find yourself drawn to the more raucous elements, the drinking games. Patrons line up for contests of endurance, skill, and wit. Tankards are lifted, dice rolled, and fortunes wagered with laughter and occasional frustration. Some games involve physical skill, others memory or clever wordplay. Women often act as judges or referees, ensuring fairness, timing, and the occasional humorous intervention. You probably won't survive a day trying to dominate these contests. They demand a mix of agility, charm, and luck. Yet you marvel at the way games transform alcohol from mere sustenance into a vehicle for social cohesion, hierarchy, and storytelling. As night deepens, storytelling takes center stage. Minstrels recite epic tales, travelers recount adventures, and local elders share anecdotes of past festivals. The rhythmic hum of conversation, the clinking of mugs, and bursts of laughter create a sensory tapestry that feels both chaotic and ordered. You notice the subtle interplay. Stories are performed with dramatic pauses, jokes punctuated by laughter, and moments of tension released by communal cheers or groans. Drink lubricates the narrative, fostering engagement, empathy, and collective memory. You wander to a quieter corner, observing subtle negotiations. A merchant quietly offers a rare spice to a local noble in exchange for protection or favor, eyes darting to ensure discretion. Ale provides the background hum, reducing inhibition and fostering conversation. Even the smallest sip seems to lubricate diplomacy, trust, or gentle persuasion. Historians still debate whether alcohol genuinely influenced social decision-making or merely coincided with it, but the patterns are clear. Drink shapes interaction in ways both tangible and symbolic. Food, drink, and ritual intertwine in subtle ways. You watch a ceremonial toast honoring the town's patron saint, tankards raised high, heads bowed. The moment is brief, yet potent, a reminder that festivals combine spiritual, communal, and secular purposes. Drink acts as both medium and message. Small beer ensures participation without danger, while stronger beverages amplify joy and heighten awareness. Even in the rowdiest moments, these rituals reinforce social cohesion, respect for authority, and shared identity. Quirky tidbits emerge. A few patrons carry small charms or talismans, believing them to protect against overindulgence or bad luck. Others chant playful rhymes while clinking mugs, an informal spell of good cheer or camaraderie. You probably won't survive a day without noticing the mixture of superstition, tradition, and humor interwoven into every action. Each gesture carries layers of meaning, connecting present revelers to centuries of inherited practice, local lore, and communal memory. At the height of the festival, chaos and order converge. Jostling crowds, spontaneous song, playful duels, and overflowing mugs coexist with solemn toasts, careful etiquette, and vigilant oversight by alewives and local officials. You sense that the energy is neither random nor purely structured. It is a living, breathing rhythm, guided by centuries of experience, cultural expectation, and human intuition. Historians still argue whether festivals primarily functioned as social safety valves, religious observances, or economic engines. But for you, the answer is immediate and sensory. They are all of these things, simultaneously, and more. As the festival winds down, the square empties slowly. Patrons stagger home, some humming tunes, others recounting moments of triumph or embarrassment. Women gather empty mugs and barrels, carefully noting which recipes worked and which need adjustment for the next event. The aroma of roasted meats lingers, mingling with the earthy scent of the night air. You probably want to survive a day without appreciating the delicate orchestration behind the apparent disorder, the careful balance of celebration, ritual, and communal well-being. Finally, as you walk along the silent streets leading away from the square, the echoes of laughter, song, and clinking mugs linger. You carry with you the understanding that medieval festivals and feasts were more than just drunken revelry. They were microcosms of society, blending food, drink, ritual, performance, and subtle social negotiation. The energy, chaos, and joy you've witnessed tonight are part of a continuum stretching across generations, preserving memory, fostering connection, and reminding all participants of the delicate, intertwined rhythms of life. And as you finally step into the quiet of the late night, the faint smell of ale and roasted bread still clinging to the air, you feel a sense of completion. The festival, with all its mess, magic, and mischief, has demonstrated the essential truth of medieval social life. Drink, food, ritual, and community are inseparable, shaping not just moments of joy, but the very fabric of daily existence. You probably won't survive a day without being drawn into this dance, this celebration of life, chaos, and human connection. You step into the dim glow of a monastery brewery, the air thick with the sweet, yeasty scent of fermenting grains. Barrels line the walls, wooden staves creaking softly under the weight of liquid gold. This is where the medieval shift from daily, small beer to stronger, more potent spirits quietly begins, long before taverns ring with raucous laughter or festivals ignite. Monks, with their careful, almost obsessive attention to detail, pioneered techniques that would later ripple through European drinking culture. You probably won't survive a day here without noticing how every movement, the stirring of vats, the testing of bubbles, the gentle tapping of barrels is steeped in centuries of knowledge and experimentation. Small beer remains your constant companion, the humble drink of peasants, children, and even some clerics. Its low alcohol content, just enough to sanitize and sustain makes it a daily staple. You drink it without thinking, relying on it for hydration, calories, and a gentle lift in mood. The recipe is simple, yet the process is nuanced. The grains must be carefully mashed, water measured, yeast added at just the right moment, and fermentation monitored closely. Quirky as it seems, each monastery has its subtle twist, a touch of honey here, a sprinkle of herbs there that distinguishes its beer from the next. Historians still argue whether the subtle flavor variations were intentional artistry or accidental happenstance, but to your taste buds, the difference is undeniable. Gradually, you notice the introduction of stronger ales and meads. Monks and select tavern keepers begin experimenting with longer fermentation, higher sugar content, and later, the introduction of distilled spirits. The transition is subtle but profound. Drink moves from daily necessity to an indulgence, a taste of luxury, a marker of status. You observe patrons savoring these drinks with deliberate slowness, inhaling aromas of honey, spices, or malt, appreciating warmth and complexity rather than mere quantity. The very act of drinking becomes ceremonial, an intentional moment of sensory engagement rather than a casual routine. You wander into a bustling tavern later in the day, drawn by the scent of spiced wine and strong ale. Here, the hierarchy of beverages mirrors the social hierarchy of medieval Europe. Peasants sip small beer, occasionally daring a stronger brew during festivals or feasts. Merchants and minor nobles favor ale with higher alcohol content or imported wines, their choices signaling wealth, taste, and worldly experience. You probably want to survive a day without noticing how even a sip of spiced wine conveys status. Its aroma, clarity, and sweetness are part of an unspoken social code, one that governs interactions and perceptions. The stronger drinks also fuel new social dynamics. Feasts, tournaments, and special occasions become stages for exuberance, storytelling, and occasionally chaos. You watch a nobleman swirl a goblet of dark wine, describing a recent hunt with flourish, while peasants nearby cheer, laugh, and mimic his gestures in jest. Women, once primarily producers of small beer, now serve spiced ales and wines, learning techniques that balance flavor, aroma, and visual presentation. The tavern transforms into a theater of taste, ritual, and social negotiation, with alcohol both as tool and performance. Historians still debate whether this ritualization was intended to control excess or merely enhance enjoyment. But the effect on behavior is tangible. You notice the quirky customs surrounding stronger drinks. Patrons toast friends, absent and present, often in elaborate, repeated sequences. Some touch tankards 3 times. Others recite brief rhymes or gestures learned from previous generations. These small rituals, playful yet precise, ensure continuity of behavior, reinforce social bonds, and subtly regulate excess. You probably want to survive a day without noticing how carefully tradition guides indulgence. Even in moments of merriment, rules spoken or unspoken shape interactions, behavior, and the very experience of drinking. The emergence of distilled spirits introduces a new dimension, potent, concentrated, and unpredictable. These early spirits are a curiosity, a marvel, and a danger. You sip a small measure and feel the warmth immediately, a stark contrast to the slow, gentle rise of small beer. Spirits carry prestige. Owning or serving them signals access to knowledge, trade routes, and wealth. Yet they also introduce risk, as their potency can quickly tip moderation into overindulgence, celebration into chaos. You probably won't survive a day here without sensing the delicate balance of power, chemistry, and human desire that these beverages embody. You wander through a marketplace where merchants display spirits alongside imported wines, meads, and ales. The bottles are small, decorative, sometimes sealed with wax, and always labeled with an eye toward distinction. Patrons carefully examine color, clarity, and aroma, comparing choices as though reading subtle codes of refinement and taste. Drinking evolves from necessity to performance, from daily sustenance to cultivated pleasure. Each sip carries meaning, reflecting personal preference, social aspiration, and cultural literacy. Historians still argue whether this transformation primarily reflected changing economic structures, taste preferences, or ritual necessity, but your senses tell the story vividly. By nightfall, taverns and feasting halls overflow with energy. You navigate among patrons, now testing the limits of indulgence. Feasts become exercises in endurance, ritualized display, and communal bonding. Tankards are raised high, goblets clink in synchronized rhythm, and voices swell in song and chant. Even amidst occasional disorder, underlying rules persist. Alewives supervise consumption, tavern keepers mediate disputes, and social norms subtly regulate excess. You probably want to survive a day without noticing how alcohol, once a humble sustenance, now orchestrates an intricate social ballet. The role of women evolves alongside stronger drinks. Alewives, skilled in both brewing and social management, begin experimenting with meads, spiced wines, and early distilled spirits. Their expertise becomes a form of power. They control production, taste, and distribution, subtly shaping social interaction. You notice a deft hand sliding a goblet toward a patron, adding a pinch of cinnamon, and offering a teasing smile. Each gesture balances skill, psychology, and ritual, reinforcing the centrality of women in the evolution of drinking culture. You probably won't survive a day here without noticing how alcohol intersects with medicine. Distilled spirits and stronger ales are increasingly prescribed for pain, digestive issues, and insomnia. Monks, physicians, and tavern keepers alike blend alcohol with herbs, spices, and honey, creating remedies that are both practical and symbolic. Historians still debate the efficacy of these concoctions, yet their prevalence underscores alcohol's central role in daily life, not merely as a pleasure, but as a medium of health, comfort, and ritualized care. The shift from small beer to stronger spirits also transforms public spaces. Taverns now host events that balance revelry with control, games of skill, storytelling competitions, and musical performances punctuate the evening. The stronger beverages elevate energy, heighten engagement, and occasionally provoke mischief or conflict. Yet even in moments of chaos, rituals, timed toasts, specific gestures, shared songs maintain cohesion. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the invisible scaffolding beneath apparent disorder, social expectation, subtle ritual, and learned behavior guiding even the wildest revelers. Finally, as the evening draws to a close, you leave a tavern buzzing with warmth, laughter, and lingering aromas of spiced wine and malt. You step onto the quiet street, feeling the contrast between public indulgence and nocturnal solitude. The transition from small beer to stronger spirits, once a subtle innovation within monastery walls, has transformed the very fabric of social life. Drink now functions as sustenance, ritual, performance, medicine, and social lubricant. You carry with you the sensory memory of that journey, the warmth on your tongue, the energy in the room, the interplay of chaos and order, and the realization that medieval society's relationship with alcohol is both practical and profoundly human. You probably won't survive a day without understanding that every sip, every ritual, and every toast is a reflection of centuries of experimentation, cultural negotiation, and human creativity. From the humble, small buyer sustaining daily life to the sophisticated, potent spirits elevating ritual, taste, and social interaction. Alcohol in medieval Europe is far more than a drink. It is a lens through which to see survival, hierarchy, tradition, and celebration all intertwined. You push open the heavy oak door of a dimly lit alehouse. The smell of hops, spilled ale, and roasted bread washing over you in a wave of warmth and familiarity. Lanterns hang unevenly from wooden beams, casting dancing shadows across rough-hewn tables crowded with tankards, mugs, and the occasional curious animal. This is the world of medieval taverns at night, a place where rules are half observed, oddities flourish, and social boundaries blur. You probably won't survive a day here without tripping over an ale-soaked floorboard or being jostled by a patron with one too many swigs. But the chaotic charm is irresistible. The first oddity you notice is a cat perched confidently on a bar shelf, eyeing patrons as if judging their tolerance. Cats are commonplace here, valued for keeping rats at bay. But some alehouse owners also believe a feline presence encourages good fortune or deters evil spirits. You probably won't survive a day without noticing the whimsical superstitions embedded into even the most practical spaces. Lanterns are hung according to arcane advice. Charms dangle above doorways, and alewives whisper small protective blessings as they pour, blending ritual, practicality, and habit seamlessly. Historians still argue whether such superstitions were primarily spiritual or simply clever marketing to draw cautious customers, but the effect is palpable. You find a table where a group of locals plays a drinking game so complicated it seems to involve 3 different types of dice, a carved wooden board, and a series of coded gestures. The rules are obscure, passed down verbally, and fluid. Mistakes are met with laughter, good-natured groans, or a light tap from a tankard. Small children and apprentices watch eagerly, learning the rituals and etiquette of participation long before they are legally or physically permitted to drink. You probably won't survive a day trying to master this game, but watching it unfold is like observing a miniature society with rules, roles, and hierarchy, all mediated by alcohol. The alehouse also harbors curious taboos. Swearing, for instance, is often tolerated in bursts, but certain invocations, blasphemous or directed at specific local saints, can provoke a frown from patrons, or even a mild reprimand from the alewife. Eating certain foods on particular days is frowned upon. You notice a small sign warning against salted pork on holy days, a quaint reminder that taverns were bound by both civil and ecclesiastical law. You probably won't survive a day without noticing how these eccentric rules create a rhythm for social interaction, subtly regulating behavior, even amidst disorder. You wander toward a shadowy corner and see a peculiar ritual. A group of men passes around a small cup of potent spiced ale, reciting a chant in hushed tones. No one explains the meaning explicitly. It is tradition, inherited, performed for good luck, protection, or perhaps sheer camaraderie. Historians still debate whether these rites were magical, symbolic, or simply a form of social bonding. But you can feel the weight of centuries in each gesture, each simp, each synchronized nod. The alehouse, you realize, is not merely a place of drinking, it is a crucible of culture, memory, and identity. Oddities abound in the decoration. Wooden beams are carved with faces, sometimes grotesque, sometimes comical, each believed to either ward off spirits or amuse patrons. Tankards bear etched inscriptions, a declaration of love, a boast of prowess, a warning of caution. You probably won't survive a day without noticing how these small details reinforce collective memory, humor, and local pride. Even spilled ale and muddied boots acquire meaning in this context, reminders of shared experience and human imperfection. The patrons themselves are a fascinating mix. You observe a merchant discreetly passing a coin to a young bard in exchange for a song, a minor noble offering advice to a sailor in return for local gossip, and an alewife subtly mediating disputes before they escalate. You probably won't survive a day without seeing how every interaction, no matter how trivial, is embedded in a complex web of social negotiation. Drink lubricates not just tongues, but relationships, ambitions, and the circulation of information. You are drawn to a table of travelers recounting tales from distant lands. One speaks of a town where taverns serve beer flavored with herbs, thought to cure melancholy. Another mentions a village where patrons toss coins into a communal cauldron for luck before drinking. Quirky as it seems, these customs spread across regions, merging practicality with superstition and often evolving into localized rituals. Historians still argue whether these customs were widespread or isolated curiosities, but for you, the patterns are unmistakable. Human creativity, belief, and mischief flourish wherever beer flows. Children are occasionally present, quietly observing or sampling diluted small beer. You probably won't survive a day without noticing how early exposure instills a sense of rhythm, ritual, and moderation, training the next generation in both social and practical skills. Similarly, apprentices in brewing and tavern management learn the trade through observation, small tasks, and mimicry, blending labor with cultural education. The tavern is thus a microcosm of society, part school, part theater, part marketplace, and part temple of communal memory. Quirky taboos continue to fascinate. Some alehouses prohibit certain words or phrases. Others mandate a particular toast before entering or leaving. A rare few even require patrons to knock in a specified rhythm, a sign of respect for the spirits believed to inhabit the building. You probably won't survive a day without noting how these rules, however eccentric, foster social cohesion, subtly guiding behavior and reinforcing hierarchy without overt policing. Humor, ritual, and tradition intertwine in ways both functional and whimsical. You notice the integration of music and performance. Minstrels, often women or itinerant performers, move from table to table, playing flutes, lutes, or drums, improvising songs tailored to current events, patrons, antics, or local lore. Patrons may toss coins, clap, or join in chorus. The alehouse becomes a living stage, with alcohol amplifying engagement, courage, and emotional expression. Historians still debate whether these performances were primarily entertainment, ritual, or social control, but their effect is immediate. Laughter, applause, and collective delight fill the space, binding strangers in shared experience. Food plays a curious role too. Odd pairings roasted, meats with honeyed fruit, stale bread dunked in spiced ale. Small morsels meant to absorb stronger spirits reveal medieval ingenuity. You probably won't survive a day without tasting some combination that surprises, delights, or even confounds your palate. The alehouse is as much a laboratory of flavor as a social arena where culinary creativity complements ritual and performance. As midnight approaches, the alehouse hums with stories, laughter, and the occasional squabble. Patrons lean on tables, whisper conspiracies, or exchange gossip. Even minor disputes are resolved with wit, negotiation, or ritualized gestures rather than violence. You probably survive a day here without noting the careful balance of chaos and control. Social energy flows with drink, guided by invisible rules, custom, and collective experience. Finally, you step into the cool night, leaving the warm glow, lingering aromas, and soft murmur of the alehouse behind. Oddities, taboos, rituals, and superstition remain etched in your mind. You understand that medieval alehouses were not just centers of consumption, they were hubs of social experimentation, education, performance, and memory. Small eccentricities, strange rules, and whimsical superstitions all served to shape behavior, reinforce social cohesion, and entertain. You probably won't survive a day without appreciating the intricate tapestry of culture, humor, ritual, and chaos that made these places central to medieval life. You step away from the dimly lit alehouse into a quieter alley, your senses still tingling from the warmth, laughter, and chaos. But now, your mind drifts to a very different kind of medieval fascination. Love magic. It's strange, almost intoxicating in its own way, the way the ancients wove desire, obsession, and ritual into everyday life. You probably want to survive a day without realizing that love magic wasn't to romance in the way modern stories tell it. It was strategic, manipulative, and often frighteningly precise. You imagine a Babylonian courtyard, sun striking the ochre bricks, where a young woman secretly arranges hair, nail clippings, and a few drops of blood into a small clay figurine. The act feels oddly intimate, almost conspiratorial, as if she is folding a part of herself into the world. The figurine, charged with her intention and linked to a distant lover or would-be suitor, embodies a hope for attraction or, sometimes, obsession. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the tension between desire and control, a delicate balance threaded through every ritual. Historians still argue whether these spells were primarily about spiritual influence or psychological manipulation, but for the participants, the stakes felt very real. You wander through Greece, where love magic takes on a slightly different shape. Spells split into two main branches: agoge, designed to inflame lust and passion, and philia, aimed at fostering harmony and emotional connection. You probably won't survive a day without noticing the peculiar use of mundane ingredients: mandrake root, honey, myrrh, even menstrual blood. Lead tablets are buried in graves, carefully inscribed with the names of those whom the spell is meant to influence. Sometimes the intention is playful, other times sinister, seeking control over emotions and actions. Quirky as it seems, The physicality of these rituals, the tactile connection to a person's essence, makes them feel tangible in a way modern digital spells cannot. In Rome, love magic becomes interwoven with status, politics, and revenge. You imagine the narrow streets echoing with whispers of defiction, spells binding curses meant to dominate a rival or secure an advantageous marriage. Exotic perfumes, oils, and Venus wine are combined with careful incantations. The act equal parts theatrical, social, and mystical. You probably won't survive a day without sensing how deeply intertwined desire, competition, and public perception were. A love potion or curse could alter reputations, marriages, or fortunes. Historians still debate whether the average Roman household practiced these rituals regularly, or whether they were reserved for the elite, but evidence suggests their allure cut across social boundaries. You drift to Egypt, where magic and religion blend seamlessly. Priests and sorcerers craft wax figurines, compose papyrus spells, and brew potions infused with honey and mandrake. Dreams are considered portals, and dream spells aim to summon visions of a lover or divine guidance for desire. You probably won't survive a day without noticing the meticulous attention to spiritual alignment, timing, and ritual correctness. A misstep could lead to madness, obsession, or social scandal. Quirky as it seems, some spells involve summoning spirits or drawing symbolic diagrams in hidden spaces, integrating creativity, fear, and hope into a single act. You notice a common thread in all these cultures. Personal substances, hair, nails, and blood are believed to carry essence, linking the spellcaster to the target in a tangible, magical way. It's intimate, slightly unsettling, and profoundly human. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the power of touch and trace. How a small fragment can symbolize a larger emotional, social, or spiritual connection. Even today, these practices echo in folklore, in the idea of love potions, charms, or tokens meant to sway affection or loyalty. The use of these magical techniques often blurs the line between love and coercion. You witness a Greek woman mixing honey with a powdered root, whispering the target's name in the darkness. Her intent might be playful, flirtatious, or controlling, sometimes all three. Historians still argue whether the ultimate goal was true affection, manipulation, or social compliance. But for the practitioner, the act carries immediacy and consequence. You probably won't survive a day without feeling the tension between ethical intent and human desire, a tension that permeates every spell, charm, and potion. You imagine an everyday marketplace where charms are sold openly, small amulets to attract attention, herbs promising devotion, or tiny trinkets hiding secret incantations. Children, merchants, and elderly observers alike are part of this vibrant, sometimes chaotic, tapestry. You probably want to survive a day without noticing how embedded magic is in daily life, how the mundane and mystical coexisted seamlessly, shaping emotions, interactions, and even economics. Quirky rituals might accompany the sale, a whispered blessing or playful incantation, weaving the magical into the social. Traveling further, you find yourself in a dimly lit room in Rome. A perfumed mixture simmers on the hearth, while a young man traces letters in wax, murmuring names that belong elsewhere. The air smells of oil, honey, and something tangibly electric. You probably want to survive a day without sensing the psychological potency of these rituals. The act of performing magic reinforces intention, focus, and hope. Even if the supernatural results are uncertain, the spell affects human behavior, subtly guiding interactions, responses, and choices. In Babylon, love magic can sometimes resemble coercion more than romance. Cursed figurines buried near thresholds, hair and blood mixed into clay, are designed to provoke obsession or fear. You probably won't survive a day without recognizing the moral ambiguity, the thin line between influence and harm. Historians still debate whether these practices were socially sanctioned or condemned, but the evidence suggests that, at least in some contexts, the community tacitly accepted, not encouraged, the use of magic to achieve emotional ends. You wander through the ritual space in Egypt, noting the meticulous preparation. Mandrake roots are handled carefully, wax figurines shaped precisely, and potions stirred clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on the spell's purpose. Every movement, gesture, and ingredient carries symbolic weight. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the power of intention. That even seemingly trivial actions, stirring a potion, whispering a name, burying a figurine, amplified desire, focus, and perceived efficacy. Quirky rituals, like walking backward while reciting a chant or placing a charm under a pillow, reinforce the drama and complexity of love magic. You realize that love magic was not only intimate, but highly social. People exchanged knowledge, techniques, and secrets in whispers or coded manuscripts. You probably won't survive a day without noticing how communal learning and secrecy intertwined, creating a network of practice that spanned households, neighborhoods, and even cities. The rituals, though deeply personal, were embedded in broader social structures, from marketplaces to temples, from taverns to private chambers. Finally, you step back, leaving the scented, whispered rooms behind, and consider the enduring impact. Love magic shaped emotions, behaviors, and social interaction across centuries. You probably won't survive a day without realizing that these practices reveal much about human psychology, the interplay of desire, fear, ritual, and control. From Babylon to Greece, Rome to Egypt, magic was a lens through which people navigated relationships, ambition, and morality. Even today, the echoes remain in folklore, literature, and the occasional playful charm or potion. As night falls, you imagine a world where love is part science, part theater, part ritual, and all human. You see the meticulous care, the audacity, and the subtle manipulations that made desire tangible, quirky, risky, and socially embedded. Love magic is a reminder of the ingenuity, ambition, and complexity of human emotions, and the ways we have always sought to shape them beyond words alone. You wander into a sunlit Greek stadium, the dust rising beneath your sandals as you step onto the sacred grounds of the Olympic Games. The scent of olive oil, sweat, and the faint temps of freshly tilled earth fills your senses. You probably won't survive a day without noticing that this is no ordinary sport. Tick is a ritual, a demonstration of excellence, and a conversation with the gods themselves. Here, every footfall, every throw of the discus, every stance in wrestling is charged with centuries of cultural significance. Historians still argue whether athletic performance was intended primarily for personal glory or collective worship, but the intensity of devotion is palpable. The stadium is alive. You see nude athletes, their skin glistening, muscles taut, competing not for fame alone, but as offerings to Zeus. The nude form symbolizes transparency, honor, and purity. Nothing is hidden from spectators or deities. You probably won't survive a day without being struck by the sheer physicality on display, the way the human body itself becomes a sacred object, celebrated in motion. Events are varied: foot races that test speed and endurance, long jumps with sand spilling like golden grains, javelin and discus flying through the air, wrestling matches that seem almost choreographed in their artistry. Women are absent from the main Olympic events, yet you imagine their own festival, the Haria, where maidens honor goddesses through athletic and ritual performance. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the gendered layers of competition. The main stadium is a male arena, yet women's rights exist alongside, equally meaningful within their own contexts. Participation, you realize, is not merely physical. It is cultural, spiritual, and symbolic, echoing the values of the community. The victors stand crowned with olive wreaths, a modest prize that masks the immense social honor they receive. You probably won't survive a day without noting how prestige operates beyond material reward. Public adulation, political influence, and the potential for lifelong recognition make athletic success a deeply influential social currency. Spectators cheer, merchants hawk food, and poets compose odes, ensuring that the memory of triumph persists long after the event ends. From Greece, you are transported to Rome, where sports take a darker, theatrical turn. The Colosseum dominates the skyline, a monumental arena of stone and shadow. Here, gladiators trained slaves, prisoners, and volunteers perform for an audience that thrives on spectacle, danger, and drama. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the tension between entertainment and mortality, the thin line separating ritual from brutality. Gladiatorial combat is intertwined with politics. Emperors maintain control through bread and circuses, orchestrating events that placate the populace while showcasing imperial might. Historians still argue whether the games primarily served social pacification or genuine civic entertainment, but the effect is immediate. Awe, fear, and excitement mingle in the audience's collective experience. The combatants themselves are skilled athletes, trained in specialized schools called ludi. You probably won't survive a day without noting their discipline, strength, and ritualized combat techniques. Fights are rarely fatal. Gladiators are expensive investments, and death is not always the spectacle. Yet the possibility of injury, public judgment, and unexpected outcomes keeps the audience riveted. Some gladiators achieve celebrity status, celebrated in songs, statues, and even post-career opportunities, blending danger with fame in a curious social calculus. You drift further west into Mesoamerica, where the ball game transforms physicality into ritual and cosmic allegory. You probably won't survive a day without noticing the rubber ball, heavy and unyielding, striking thighs and hips as it soars through stone hoops, played by Olmecs, Aztecs, and Maya. The game is both sport and religious reenactment, a symbolic battle between gods, life and death, order and chaos. Spectators watch intently, not merely for the game itself, but for the spiritual significance, knowing that outcomes are intertwined with divine favor and human destiny. Occasionally, the ball game carries a ritual cost. Sacrifice may accompany the event, sometimes of the losing team's captain, sometimes of captives, in a dramatic display of devotion and cosmic balance. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the weight of stakes far beyond mere victory or defeat. The court itself is a sacred space. Painted symbols, stone carvings, and orientation to celestial bodies reinforce its connection to mythology, divinity, and moral order. Historians still debate whether sacrifices were universal or context-specific, but the impact on players and spectators alike is undeniable. Every throw, jump, and strike carries gravity far beyond sport. Egyptian sports offer another flavor entirely. Wrestling, archery, and ceremonial rowing dominate. You probably won't survive a day without noticing how sport blends leisure, ritual, and preparation for the afterlife. Wrestling is depicted in tomb paintings, symbolic of cosmic struggle and divine order, while archery serves both military and ceremonial purposes. Rowing competitions celebrate mythical journeys, linking performance to storytelling, myth, and spiritual aspiration. Women, too, participate in dance, gymnastics, and fertility rites, highlighting the diversity and cultural integration of physical activity. China provides a different lens. Ritualized archery, polo, or jaegu for men and women, and martial arts training emphasize moral cultivation, discipline, and balance. You probably won't survive a day without observing the philosophical undercurrent. Physical excellence is inseparable from virtue, social responsibility, and mental mastery. Mental sports, like Aikido, complement martial training, reinforcing strategic thinking and moral reasoning. Historians still argue whether these practices were primarily for elite refinement or communal education. But the blending of ethics and athletics is evident in every move. In Persia and Mesopotamia, sports reflect divine favor and preparation for leadership. Lion hunts, wrestling matches, and horse riding drills signal both physical prowess and moral authority. You probably won't survive a day without seeing the symbolic weight. Success in sport mirrors social and cosmic hierarchy. Persian youth train not only to compete, but to embody truthfulness, courage, and skill lessons in moral, civic, and martial responsibility. Similarly, South Asian wrestling and martial arts integrate spiritual discipline with physical mastery. Temple rituals reinforcing the sanctity of practice and the moral weight of skill. Women across cultures participate in limited but meaningful ways in ritualized dance, ceremonial competitions, or specific athletic festivals. You probably won't survive a day without noticing how physical culture, while gendered, still provides an avenue for expression, recognition, and spiritual participation. In some societies, their presence is celebrated, in others constrained, yet their role, however circumscribed, leaves traces in art, literature, and ritual record. As you leave these varied arenas behind, you reflect on the universality of sport as ritual, spectacle, and social glue. You probably won't survive a day without appreciating the layers of meaning: physical, ethical, spiritual, and political. From the disciplined nudity of Greek athletes to the spectacle-driven Roman arenas, from the cosmic Mesoamerican ball courts to the morally infused Chinese martial traditions, sport becomes a lens through which societies articulate identity, hierarchy, and aspiration. The common thread is clear. Competition is never merely physical. Every throw, jump, or strike carries moral, social, or spiritual weight. Ritual, narrative, and spectacle infuse human motion with significance, linking bodies to culture, divinity, and community. You probably won't survive a day without noticing the echoes in modern sport. rituals, ceremonies, and ethical expectations persist, even when the stakes are far lower, the battles symbolic rather than literal. Finally, the stadium's empty, the crowds dissipate, and you stand alone, sensing the lingering power of human aspiration and communal celebration. You probably want to survive a day without realizing that ancient games were more than contests. They were living expressions of values, fears, hopes, and the delicate balance between human limitation and divine ambition. Every cheer, chant, and ritual act is a reminder of our eternal fascination with excellence, competition, and the sacred dimension of play. You leave the roar of arenas and the rhythm of athletic endeavor behind, stepping instead into the quiet, shadowed streets of Paris. The city hums around you, but beneath your feet lies another world entirely, the beginnings of the Paris catacombs. You probably want to survive a day without realizing how extraordinary it is that a city of life harbors a city of the dead, a hidden labyrinth stretching for miles beneath stone and mortar. Historians still argue whether the catacombs were primarily functional or symbolic at their inception. But walking this path, you feel both practicality and poetry intertwined. Originally, the tunnels were limestone quarries, dug over centuries to supply the city with building material. You trudge along narrow corridors, the stone walls cool against your palms, imagining laborers chiseling blocks with hammer and chisel, their sweat soaking into the dust beneath your feet. The rock echoes with their rhythm, a sound you can almost hear if you tilt your head to listen. You probably want to survive a day without sensing the laborious effort it took to carve out this subterranean skeleton of the city above. The tunnels themselves, winding and labyrinthine, hint at centuries of use and adaptation. By the 18th century, Paris faced a crisis. Cemeteries were overflowing. Saint Innocent's Cemetery, a sprawling urban graveyard, had become a dangerous, disease-ridden heap. You probably want to survive a day without recognizing the desperation that led authorities to seek radical solutions. Night after night, corpses were exhumed, carried silently through winding streets, and lowered into the abandoned quarries. Priests accompanied the process, offering prayers, candles flickering against the darkness. The movement was solemn, ritualistic, almost theatrical, and the air would have smelled of earth, wax, and decay. Historians still argue whether the procession was more about public morality or public health, but the psychological impact must have been immense. At first, bones were dumped in haphazard piles, but over decades, they were arranged with an eerie sense of artistry. You probably want to survive a day without noticing the macabre patterns. Skulls stacked in neat rows, femurs aligned with deliberate precision, and crosses forming in unexpected places. Louis-Étienne Héricart de Thury, in the early 19th century, transformed this chaotic ossuary into a carefully curated experience. The catacombs became a moral monument as much as a practical solutioner, reminder of mortality, the fragility of life, and the inevitability of death. You run your fingers along the cold stone walls, imagining the countless hands that have done the same over centuries, hands now absent, leaving only remnants of themselves behind. The remains are anonymous, yet profoundly human. Bakers, servants, clergy, children, nobles, revolutionaries each interred in proximity to strangers, saints beside sinners. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the leveling power of death. How social hierarchies above ground dissolve into uniformity underground. The catacombs erase identity and elevate mortality into a shared, communal truth. There's a peculiar intimacy here, a whispered connection across centuries, even as you walk alone. Beyond the historical function, the catacombs have taken on modern significance. The official routes are open to tourists, lanterns illuminating inscriptions like "Stop, this is the Empire of Death." Yet beneath these curated paths lies an untamed network, explored by cataphiles, urban adventurers, navigating forbidden tunnels, creating secret libraries, art installations, and even underground cinemas. You probably won't survive a day without feeling the thrill and danger. Disorientation, flooding, and collapsing passages are real, yet curiosity and human daring persist. Graffiti, symbols, and cryptic inscriptions tell stories of quarrymen, resistance fighters, and secret societies, a hidden layer of cultural memory coexisting with the living city above. During times of upheaval, the catacombs became more than resting places. You probably won't survive a day without imagining the French Revolution, rebels navigating tunnels, revolutionaries hiding, the dead above watching silently as the living fought for liberty. Later, during World War II, the French resistance used the labyrinthine passages as command posts, shelters, and escape routes. These bones, quiet and immobile, became part of human strategy, proof that even the dead participate indirectly in history. Historians still argue whether these underground maneuvers were widespread or isolated, but their cultural imprint is undeniable. You wander further, noting inscriptions left by quarrymen, some dating back centuries. A curious mix of practical notation, personal memento, and cryptic art. You probably won't survive a day without sensing that these marks are conversations across time. Tiny signatures of people asserting presence in a world dominated by absence. Cataphiles continue this tradition, leaving modern graffiti, artistic flourishes, and even cryptic maps that document spaces unseen by the official tourist route. The tunnels are alive with layered stories, combining archaeology, folklore, and urban adventure. The macabre aesthetic is heightened by poetic touches, arrangements of bones, plaques with solemn reminders, and skulls gazing at you from their perches. You probably won't survive a day without feeling the juxtaposition of horror and beauty, the meticulous order of chaos, the artistry of death, the serenity of reflection amid shadows. Some visitors experience anxiety or fear, while others find quiet contemplation, a space to consider mortality, legacy, and the passage of time. Exploring deeper, you realize the catacombs operate as both functional ossuary and cultural symbol. Bones reinforce the walls, provide structural stability, and remind anyone who ventures below that life above is temporary. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the philosophical weight. Death is permanent, yet human ingenuity creates spaces that honor, manipulate, and coexist with that permanence. It is a dialogue between the living and the dead, an architectural conversation spanning centuries. You pass chambers named after cemeteries they replaced, Saint-Germain, Les Innocents, and others. You probably won't survive a day without noticing that each section carries a distinct narrative, a blend of practical necessity, artistic vision, and moral instruction. Some areas are claustrophobic, others surprisingly spacious, with bones arranged like furniture, lines of skulls forming eerie corridors. The air is cool, damp, and slightly metallic. Every inhale a reminder of life above, and every echo a whisper from below. Folklore thickens the shadows. Tales of phantom quarrymen, lost explorers, and secret rooms abound. Some stories speak of hidden bars, clandestine cinemas, and cult gatherings, though most are urban legend. You probably won't survive a day without enjoying the blend of history and myth, the way imagination and evidence intersect underground. Scholars still debate which tales are factual, exaggerated, or purely narrative. But the effect on visitors is uniform, all curiosity and a gentle fear that quickens the pulse. As you trace your fingers along the inscriptions and arranged bones, the catacombs begin to feel like a living organism of memory. You probably won't survive a day without noticing the layering of time, culture, and human emotion. Ancient quarry workers, priests, revolutionaries, and modern urban explorers all leave traces in this subterranean city. Every turn, every shadow, every faint echo carries the resonance of lives once lived and now immortalized in stone and bones. Finally, emerging from the tunnels into the muted Parisian dusk, you reflect on the paradox of the catacombs. You probably want to survive a day without realizing that they are at once a solution to urban crisis, a monumental work of art, a moral reminder, and a playground for modern adventurers. Life continues above, yet below lies a silent testament to mortality, ingenuity, and the human capacity to transform even death into a narrative, a ritual, and a shared cultural experience. You step back into the dim corridors of the catacombs, this time letting your fingertips brush the cold, damp stone walls. The air is heavy, carrying whispers of centuries past. You probably want to survive a day without sensing the tension between fear and fascination. This is a world of shadows, secrets, and stories that refuse to remain buried. Historians still argue whether the catacombs are primarily a moral lesson or a functional necessity. But the atmosphere you feel suggests both are inseparable here. As you move deeper, the walls seem to close in, and the rhythmic echo of your footsteps becomes a heartbeat against the stillness. You notice inscriptions etched into stone dates, initials, cryptic symbols. Some are practical notes from quarry workers. Others are messages left by clandestine explorers, the cataphiles, who dare to wander where tourists cannot. You probably won't survive a day without realizing that each mark is a conversation across time, a bridge between the living and the dead, and an assertion that someone existed even in darkness. In certain chambers, the bones are arranged with artistic precision, skulls stacked like sentinels, femurs forming intricate geometric patterns, and sometimes entire walls dedicated to macabre symmetry. You probably won't survive a day without feeling the eerie beauty of it, a combination of human mortality and creativity that is almost hypnotic. The catacombs are more than a resting place. They are a gallery, a solemn exhibition curated over centuries, blending function with philosophy. Historians still debate whether these arrangements were primarily structural or aesthetic, but standing here, you understand that they are both. The catacombs' labyrinthine passages lead to hidden chambers, some officially off-limits, others known only to the most daring explorers. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the thrill and danger. Uneven floors, low ceilings, sudden drop-offs, and the ever-present risk of flooding make unauthorized exploration a test of courage and intuition. Cataphiles have created underground libraries, makeshift cinemas, and even art installations, a modern echo of the creative spirit that has always thrived here. Each hidden corner tells a story of human curiosity and rebellion against boundaries, intertwining culture with the thrill of the forbidden. You pause before a chamber lined entirely with skulls, their hollow eyes seeming to watch you. You probably won't survive a day without feeling the subtle reminder of mortality. Here, the distinctions between rich and poor, saint and sinner, noble and commoner vanish. Every skull represents a life once lived, now anonymous, yet profoundly human. Some are children, some monks, some victims of plague or revolution. Their silent testimony evokes contemplation, an understanding that history is as much about the ordinary as it is about the extraordinary. Walking further, you encounter graffiti etched into the stone by generations of visitors, names, symbols, and dates. Some are simple signatures, others are cryptic messages or artwork. You probably won't survive a day without noticing how these markings form a kind of underground social network, connecting past and present. The catacombs are a living archive, a palimpsest of human presence that grows with each visitor brave enough to enter. Historians still debate how much of this graffiti should be preserved versus regulated, but there is no denying its role in the cultural narrative of these tunnels. The shadows here seem to breathe. You probably won't survive a day without being aware of the psychological impact. The low ceilings, narrow passages, and dim light create an almost dreamlike state, a mixture of anxiety and fascination. Sounds are amplified, the drip of water echoing like distant footsteps. Some claim to have seen phantom quarrymen, spectral figures carrying tools or wandering aimlessly. Urban legends speak of hidden rooms with bars, secret cinemas, and cult gatherings, stories that blend fact and fiction into a tapestry of intrigue. As you navigate a particularly narrow passage, the walls feel close, almost pressing against your shoulders. You probably won't survive a day without noticing how the catacombs manipulate space and perception. Tunnels twist unexpectedly. Intersections appear where none should exist, and familiar paths become disorienting. Cataphiles map these spaces with painstaking detail, creating underground maps that few will ever see, documenting both the architecture and the culture that thrives in secrecy. Every corridor is a lesson in both geography and human daring, a reminder of how curiosity and courage shape experience. The aesthetic of the catacombs extends beyond bones. Plaques with inscriptions, poetic phrases, and warnings punctuate the tunnels. Arrête, cest, l'empire, de la mort, stop. This is the empire of death. You probably won't survive a day without feeling the weight of these words. A message meant to provoke reflection, humility, and respect. The interplay between warning and allure draws visitors onward, a psychological balancing act between fear and fascination. Historians still argue whether these inscriptions were intended for moral instruction or tourism, but their impact is visceral. In some chambers, remnants of historical events emerge, bones from revolutionaries, monks, and nuns carefully relocated from overcrowded cemeteries, a testament to the city's response to crisis. You probably won't survive a day without noticing how practical necessity merges with ritual and artistry. These tunnels are not only a solution to a public health crisis, but also a space where human ingenuity, reverence for the dead, and aesthetic sensibility converge. The catacombs serve as a structural, cultural, and moral foundation for the city above. You pause at a particularly quiet alcove, imagining the process centuries ago, priests leading processions by candlelight, carts carrying bodies, the solemnity of each transfer. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the solemn rhythm of that ritual, the blend of practicality, spirituality, and human emotion. Modern explorers add their layers: graffiti art, whispers, but beneath it all, the essence remains: respect for the past, acknowledgement of mortality, and the silent testimony of millions long gone. Despite the darkness, there is life here of a sort. Rats scurry, water trickles, and the echoes of footsteps, both ancient and modern, create a subtle symphony. You probably won't survive a day without noting that this is a place of paradox, vibrant with human activity, yet silent with the presence of the dead. It is a living museum, a dynamic archive, and a sacred space all at once. Historians still debate the ethical implications of tourism in the catacombs, but the experience undeniably fosters reflection, curiosity, and awe. As you emerge from this shadowed world back into the muted light of Parisian streets, the catacombs' secrets linger in your mind. You probably won't survive a day without appreciating how this subterranean city merges function: art, history, and legend. The bones, the inscriptions, the hidden rooms, the graffiti, they all tell stories of survival, morality, creativity, and human curiosity. The catacombs are a reminder that beneath every modern city lies layers of memory, mortality, and human ingenuity. You pause for a moment, letting the air above ground fill your lungs, contrasting the damp, subterranean atmosphere. You probably won't survive a day without recognizing that the catacombs are more than an ossuary. They are a bridge between past and present, the living and the dead, the mundane and the mysterious. Their shadows teach patience, reflection, and respect, inviting you to consider the fleeting nature of life and the enduring impact of human presence. Finally, as twilight settles over Paris, you reflect on the duality of this place, both terrifying and mesmerizing, practical and artistic, historical and mythical. You probably won't survive a day without feeling the subtle lessons embedded in the walls, that life is transient, that creativity persists even in darkness, and that curiosity can illuminate paths otherwise unseen. The catacombs, with their shadows and secrets, remain a monument not only to the dead, but to the living, a reminder of our perpetual dance with history, mortality, and imagination. You descend once more into the quiet of the catacombs, letting your eyes adjust to the dim light and your fingers trace the cool stone. The air is thick with history, dust, and the faint scent of limestone. You probably won't survive a day without feeling the weight of the centuries pressing gently around you, a constant reminder that life above is fleeting while this underground world endures. Historians still argue whether the catacombs are primarily a practical solution to overcrowding or a monument to mortality. But standing here, you understand they are inseparable. As you walk, you take note of the meticulous arrangement of bones, the skulls stacked in careful rows, the femurs forming geometric patterns, the occasional cross formed from the skeletal remains of unknown individuals. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the eerie artistry, the human hand behind the order, and the silent reverence for those interred. It is a place where function meets aesthetic vision, a subterranean gallery curated by both necessity and intention. You pause before a wall of skulls, their hollow eyes staring back at you in quiet judgment. You probably won't survive a day without recognizing the universal truth etched here. Death does not discriminate. Rich and poor, saint and sinner, revolutionary and ordinary citizen, all share this space equally. There's a strange comfort in that equality, a leveling effect that makes your own anxieties seem smaller against the backdrop of millions who lived and passed before you. Historians still debate whether this was an intentional moral lesson or simply a byproduct of logistics, but the effect is undeniable. Moving deeper into the labyrinth, you notice small inscriptions carved into the walls, some dating back centuries, others left by modern urban explorers. You probably want to survive a day without feeling the conversation across time, the silent dialogue between past and present. Cataphiles, those daring adventurers who navigate the forbidden sections, leave messages, art, and symbols, continuing a tradition of engagement with this subterranean world. Every corridor becomes a layered map of human curiosity, courage, and creativity. Some chambers feel almost sacred. You probably want to survive a day without sensing the careful curation of space. Niches of bones arranged in somber patterns, plaques inscribed with poetic reminders, and the occasional hidden alcove revealing the ingenuity of previous generations. These tunnels are not merely repositories of the dead. They are philosophical spaces, inviting contemplation, reflection, and a deeper understanding of mortality. The quiet hum of the underground seems almost meditative, punctuated only by the drip of water and the echo of your footsteps. You stumble upon a particularly narrow passage, the ceiling low and the walls pressing close. You probably won't survive a day without feeling both claustrophobia and curiosity, the mix that makes exploration simultaneously exhilarating and humbling. Cataphiles have mapped these passages with painstaking detail, documenting every twist and turn, every chamber, and every hidden feature. Their underground maps are works of art in themselves, revealing the human need to understand, navigate, and imprint upon the spaces we inhabit, even those filled with the remnants of the long dead. The shadows seem to move with you. You probably want to survive a day without feeling the interplay between imagination and reality. Whispers of phantom quarrymen, stories of hidden bars, clandestine cinemas, and secret meetings, folklore, legend, and anecdote mingle with historical fact, creating a rich tapestry of narrative that blurs the line between the real and the imagined. Historians still debate the veracity of many of these tales, but their power lies not in proof, but in the fascination they inspire. You notice the structural ingenuity of the catacombs. Bones reinforce the walls in some sections, acting as literal building material while also serving as memorials. You probably want to survive a day without appreciating this dual function. Practical engineering intertwined with moral and aesthetic considerations. The catacombs are a testament to human creativity, the ability to turn a crisis cemetery, overcrowding, disease, and urban expansion into a lasting work of art and reflection. Walking further, you encounter plaques with warnings and poetic phrases. Stop. This is the empire of death. You probably won't survive a day without absorbing the weight of these words. A reminder that every step in this underground city is a step through mortality itself. The catacombs teach patience, contemplation, and respect. They are not merely a tourist attraction. They are a meditation on the fragility and continuity of human life. You pause in an alcove, imagining the centuries of procession that brought these bones here. Priests, laborers, and ordinary citizens carried out solemn tasks by candlelight, a ritual blending practicality with reverence. You probably won't survive a day without sensing the rhythm of that process, the measured steps, whispered prayers, and the quiet acknowledgement of mortality. Each layer of human action leaves an imprint in stone and bone, a silent testament to the continuity of life and the inevitability of death. As you continue, you reflect on the cultural significance of the catacombs. They are both a historical record and a space for modern interaction. You probably won't survive a day without noticing how tourists, scholars, and urban explorers alike engage with this environment. It is a place of education, reflection, and sometimes adventure. The tunnels preserve a unique narrative that blends practicality, ritual, artistry, and human curiosity. Historians still debate the ethics of tourism here, but few can deny the profound effect of walking among millions of bones, witnessing the scale of human mortality firsthand. You think of the lives represented here, children who never grew, workers who built the city above, revolutionaries who fought for change, and ordinary citizens whose names are lost to history. You probably won't survive a day without feeling the humbling reality that all of these lives intersect in this subterranean realm, their stories converging into a silent symphony of existence and remembrance. The catacombs are a mirror of human society, stripped of pretense, hierarchy, and artifice. Finally, as you prepare to leave this labyrinth, you take a slow, deliberate walk back through the tunnels. You probably won't survive a day without carrying with you the lessons of patience, humility, and curiosity that the catacombs impart. The shadows, the bones, the inscriptions, and the whispers of the past have left an indelible mark. Each step above ground, each breath of Parisian air, feels more precious, more fragile, and more resonant with the weight of human history. Emerging into the evening light, you glance back one last time, imagining the labyrinth stretching beneath your feet, alive with memory, art, danger, and reflection. You probably won't survive a day without realizing that these tunnels are more than stone and bones. They are a living testament to creativity, mortality, and human resilience. Historians still argue over many aspects of the catacombs, their ethics, their function, their cultural meaning, but what you feel in this moment transcends debate. Awe, respect, and a quiet contemplation of life and death intertwined.